He couldn't say, just go at the pace of the lyric. He just had to say, like, it was so cryptic. Hold Your Own was the first one. When he heard that, he came in and he listened. Just this thing that I had in my notebook and Dan playing the bass. And he was like, that's it. So that was the first one where we were like, okay, he wants me to just do poetry. We were like, what? It's the biggest rap producer of all time. He's telling me to stop rapping.
Evening everyone, and welcome to episode 76 of the podcast. Greg here. This is the second episode of a brand new run of Midnight Chats. 10 new conversations coming in total, arriving every Thursday at midnight. And we've given everything a lick of paint, a small freshen up, so we hope you like it. We kicked off this new series of episodes last week with Karen O from the JayZ, and tonight's guest is equally as incredible. It's Tempest. It's good timing as I saw Kate perform at a festival just last week and still reeling from that. She plays dates this autumn, so do go along if you can. As lots of you will know, it is an experience that goes way beyond your average gig. We recorded this episode a while ago in the middle of the summer, June time, just before the Glastonbury festival, which Kate played, around the time that her latest album, The Book of Traps and Lessons, came out. Of course, she's not just a musician, but an award-winning writer, novelist, poet, producer, playwright. We get into all of that. And from our point of view, it's not a stretch to describe Kate as one of the most important and relevant British artists out there right now. So basically, it's a pleasure to have her on as this evening's guest. And don't forget, you can support this podcast by subscribing to Loud and Quiet magazine. All the information is at loudandquiet.com/subscribe. Sign up and we'll post you our next 9 issues for as little as £3 per month. I try and listen to as many podcasts as I can, and I've had a number of favourites recently, and you've been on a couple of episodes that I've really loved. One, which was from a long time ago, I think, with James O'Brien, that you did.
Right, yeah.
Probably a couple of years ago now, I think.
Yeah.
And then a recent one with DJ Semtex, Who We Be, his podcast. It was a really, really good conversation. Do you enjoy doing podcasts? And also, like, just generally, are you somebody that listens to podcasts much? Do you check them out?
I actually don't listen to that many of them. When I'm recommended good ones from people that check this out, then I've listened to them and I've really loved them. I haven't investigated them on my own terms that much. But they're kind of the perfect thing when especially if you've got long travelling hours and things like that. It feels a bit more nourishing. I don't know why, but it does feel like a more nourishing way of listening to stuff when you're passing time, doesn't it? It feels like it's kind of better for you than the radio or something.
It's good. It's like eating your greens is healthy.
It's something like that. I know. But in terms of whether I enjoyed them, I definitely much prefer sitting down and having a chat, and it's a bit more relaxed and the chat's free to go, wherever it ends up going, than doing an interview, print journalism. I find I have found it a bit uncomfortable in the past. We're just sitting on a sofa, aren't we? Looking at loads of photographs of Justin Bieber.
I can see you up there.
I'm up there as well.
There's Kate's face on the cover of Loud and Quiet magazine. Can I give you one tip? Have you listened to George the Poet's podcast?
I haven't actually, no.
So it won a lot of awards at the end of last year. It's just fantastic, and it goes to that point that you just said about how they feel quite nourishing and quite. I think they can be really intimate when they're done very well and really innovative because they use sound in clever ways. And George's podcast is just incredible. Yeah, you feel educated by it as well. I
bet he is a fantastic educator, isn't he? He's so committed to his knowledge and to getting his mind around things and getting that articulated. I think I could imagine that being amazing, actually. Cool, thanks for the tip. I'll definitely check that out.
You've just released your new album, The Book of Traps and Lessons. Just before the album came out, you marked it by playing a show in Catford, which is kind of it's local, right? Played a local theatre to debut the new album and play all of it, is that right? How was that experience playing basically somewhere so close to home? Was that a nice way to launch this new chapter, if you like?
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was a really beautiful experience. The theatre itself is couple of 100 years old. I'm literally just made that up. That's probably wrong. Maybe it's not that old, but it's one of those kind of beautiful. I think they built it when organs used to accompany pictures, cinema, And I think it was built as a kind of picture house. And usually what's on there is like panto, or there's sometimes comedy on there. And yeah, it's in my neck of the woods. It's like just like really close to where I grew up and where I live. And I've always dreamed of playing there. Like, and it is just such a cool thing to do. This was the first time since it's come out that we played it all the way through. But the way that we recorded the album was like as one live take kind of thing. So I have performed it in full, like loads of times. But that was trying to get the right take for the album, if you see what I'm saying. It felt like a really grounded and profound way of launching, because it's, yeah, like you say, it's home. And it made me feel just so full of love, really. Like, and it's such a positive way of walking out onto stage, just all this love in me for where I'm from and who was there. And
lots of friends and family and stuff supporting you that night.
Nick, the pub across the road put a banner out of their window saying, "We love you, Kate." Like, the pub across the road. And for me, this is why it's deep, because it's like, if you're from there, it's so powerful that to feel that coming at you from your home.
Yeah. The local pride, like that's
it's beautiful,
amazing.
Man. It was like, it made me cry. That I couldn't believe it. Like, I could not believe that. I just thought, wow. I just felt really overwhelmed and felt really, really happy to be able to do something that made people go like, yeah, cool, you know. And the theatre said that they've had loads of contact from people that, you know, didn't know anything about them being there, and lots of interest from people, and all their kind of social media followings have gone up, and they're dead happy with that, and like they were being really nice and saying thanks for doing this here. Bonkers, amazing night.
We'll talk a bit about the recording of the album shortly, but in terms of the writing of it, just tell me a little bit about that, because you worked with Carey again, who's done the music for it, and you worked on it in Streatham, which is a place where you've worked on your material for a number of years, as I understand. But what eventually has ended up on this album, have they been pieces of work that you've been putting together, you know, for a number of years, or did you sit down and kind of attempt to try and write it in one go with sessions with Dan, or how did it come about that way, the writing of it?
So the writing of the album actually was motored by the process, really, that Rick was helping us to find and discover. Like, this whole album, it's unlike anything we've ever done before, because what happened was Rick Rubin saw me on a TV show about 5 years ago, in 2013, or maybe it was early 2014, and I was performing an extract of my poetry on this show, and he'd seen it, and he gave me a call and said, like, hi.
Yeah. You take that call from Rick Rubin and you go, hey Rick, unknown number.
And he had been really moved by the performance, and he wanted to make a record. Because what he saw was a poet. He didn't know that I was also a rapper, or that I had, you know, musical ambitions or anything like that. He didn't know about me. He just had seen this poet, and he thought, well, I'd love to work out how this could be with music, you know, make an album. He saw something in the intention there that he wanted to pursue. At the time, I was extremely busy. I was about to put out Everybody Down. I was touring Brand New Ancients. I was doing rewrites on Wasted and Hopelessly Devoted. I was about to start touring, which are two plays that I'd written. I was also working on my novel, which was like really hard, and I was working on my poetry collection, Hold Your Own. There was like loads of stuff was going on. So he was just extremely patient, and we just kept communicating slowly, right? All this to say, it's such a long way of saying it, all this to say that the first week we actually managed to go there and do some writing at Rick's place, Dan and I. You know, a year probably went past, but we'd been talking, and this process that he was interested in, we'd begun to talk about what it was. But basically he'd said like loads of kind of cryptic stuff that we didn't understand, because he couldn't tell us what he wanted. He could just tell us when it wasn't quite right. So we made some demos in Streatham, like you say, and we sent them to him, and he was like, it's not quite right, it's not this. And then he was like, look, I don't want any drums. And we were like, what? I don't want any drums? What does that mean? Like, and then so we made like about 10 like folk songs with a guitar, you know, like really bizarre. And that shows you how willing we were to like just follow his guidance and just do what we could, like throw ourselves at it when we could. Anyway, we went out to Malibu, to his studio in Malibu. It's an incredible studio called Shangri-La, which is like paradise.
Is it like paradise? You walk through and it's like beautiful setting, like the bus studio, the sort of legendary bus studio there, obviously, Bob Dylan's old tour bus. But then like it looks like a green oasis, like in the pictures I've seen, and Rubin's like padding around in the garden without any shoes on and just looking totally zen, waking up and eating granola and doing yoga. It just looks very idyllic. Is that reality?
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's what it's like. It's unbelievable. Very different to what we know, to how we're used to reality being. Like suddenly it's like, wow, this is a new reality that we're very happy to be involved in for a little bit of time. We went out there with this kind of bag of folk songs that we didn't know what we were doing with. We start this process and it's like, Rick, he kind of wasn't really around, and we were just like, well, we've come all this way and he's not really here. And then basically we had to get our heads around what it was that was going to start happening. And what it was is that he would come in for about an hour in the late afternoon, and he'd listen to whatever it was that we'd made, and he'd talk to us about it, and then he'd go away, and we'd keep writing, and then he'd come back in the early evening for, half an hour, to listen again to whatever else we'd made, have another chat with us. And then he'd leave us to our own devices all night to turn those things around that he'd said about the demos. So we just we must have made 100 demos for this album. So all this to say is that some of those songs that are on this album did begin their life some years ago. Hold Your Own, the poem, began life as a note that I wrote to myself because I was struggling to work out what I wanted Hold Your Own, the poetry collection, to say. And Hold Your Own, the poem, was me instructing myself. It was never intended for anyone else to hear it. It was my way of getting my head in order about what I wanted my collection to do. And that's what I wanted it to do. That was, I was talking about gender and sexuality and shame and all this stuff, which is what that poem is basically telling me to do. Anyway, so we got to this point where we were so desperate to try and find ideas. We were really clutching at straws. We didn't know what it was that he wanted us to do. And I was just going through my notebook and I just tried that out, just tried reading that out while Dan played these chords on the bass. Right? And we were getting to the point where it was I think actually that was the first time, because Rick had been like, I don't want you to listen to the music. So I was recording the lyrics outside, intentionally not listening to Dan, because as soon as I heard a beat, I would start keeping to the beat. Yeah. Spent 15 years learning how to stay on a beat. It's actually a really hard thing to hear a beat and not get on it. It just had never occurred to me that when there was music that I wouldn't be in time with the music. But Rick's thing was go at the integrity of the pace of the lyric. But he couldn't say just go at the pace of the lyric. He just had to say it was so cryptic. Hold Your Own was the first one. When he heard that, he came in and he listened. Just this thing that I had in my notebook and Dan playing the bass. And he was like, that's it. So that was the first one where we were like, okay, he wants me to just do poetry. We were like, what? It's the biggest rap producer of all time. He's telling me to stop rapping.
It's Rick, you could have just said that.
Well, it's he couldn't just say that, because also the thing is, he can't just tell you you've got to find it. You've got to discover the process. You've got to find out. Also, he doesn't know. He doesn't know any more than we know. He's just looking for this thing all the time. He's trying to strip away everything that's unnecessary, all the convention, everything that's stabilizers or, security. Just get rid of that, get closer to the essence. That's not an easy instruction to give. It's a process. You have to just keep making demos. That was a really long-winded way of saying that the writing process happened slowly over many years. But then once we finally had the shape, and we had about 6 songs that Rick had said, some of these are great, 5 or 6 of these are exceptional. And we took those 6 and we were like, okay, these are really working. And then I wrote around those 6 to make it into a cohesive piece. Even as I was doing that, I had to fight the temptation to narrativize and link too much, because Rick wasn't interested in that. He was like, that's more stuff that gets in the way of the meaning. Put the meaning front and center. Put the words at the front. You don't need narrative device, because it should just be there.
Like a real sort of hands-off form of guidance that he provides. Yeah. Effectively just comes sort of gently, maybe nudging you in directions to make your own decisions about things. Maybe a little bit unnerving by the sound of it, that he's not there 9 to 5 forensically listening to the stuff you're doing, but sort of just popping in and just being like, have you thought about this?
Do you know what? But it's even better that he does it that way, because that's what he needs to do to be able to listen. If he was there all day, then his ears would get as tired as our ears are getting. And he would, it's like, what would he be doing all day actually? Like, the whole thing that he offers you is his ability to really listen. It's extremely rare, like, for someone to listen that intently to your work. I've never experienced it before. I think that definitely some bands, I've spoken to other people that have worked with him, and definitely people are thrown at first by that thing, because you're used to a producer being in the room with you, rolling up their sleeves and getting stuck in. But that's not what he's about. So Dan Carey and I did the writing, we did the recording with an engineer, great engineer called Sean Oakley. And Rick he was just the ears, he's just this like presence at the helm.
It sounds like there's a lot of material, 90 odd songs that didn't make the album perhaps, that you've got there that's been created. Do you think you'll put those together into a collection at some point?
No.
They feel like they belong to that time and that was that.
I have this idea, I might be wrong about this, but I just don't think you should go backwards like that. I do a lot of writing towards a project. So for example, my novel that I mentioned, I probably wrote 100,000 words that towards that novel that I cut, that didn't make it. You could call it's like demos. I made all these demos towards that final cut. If you allow yourself to be too attached to things that you've cut, then you're trapped. You're absolutely not able to move forwards creatively. And so there's a part of you that has to accept and acknowledge and enjoy the fact that like you're going to write a hell of a lot of stuff. A lot of it's going to be no good. And the decision to not use it is extremely liberating. And it's like freshness, free. It means that you can keep going. Because I associate the idea of like mining old material with an element of not believing I can create new material right now. That is the fear that makes me go back and mine old material. Why don't I just write something new? Why don't I just start from here? There's a story about like, is it Hemingway? Who was it? I think it was Hemingway, or one of those kind of writers. I think it was Hemingway. And basically he got to like 25 and he had a briefcase with all of his notebooks that he'd been carrying around all his life, He wanted to be a writer, but he hadn't written anything yet, but he wanted to be a writer. And he had this briefcase with all his notes and his manuscripts. Obviously back then there was no, that was it. If you had your manuscript, that was your manuscript.
It's not on a hard drive somewhere.
Yeah. And there was a fire and he lost it all and it all burnt. And then he said that it was the best thing that ever happened to him, because suddenly he was free to actually write from now, new. You get so attached to old ideas, you carry them around, So right now my feeling is I'm really, really happy that we made the decision to not use those demos. And I'm really glad that we had the ability and the time to write them and decide to discard them.
Sounds like it was surreal at moments being out at Shangri-La.
Yeah.
Even the day when Rubin turns up with JayZ and brings him in to play your music. What was that experience like?
Crazy.
Yeah.
But like stuff like that was happening all the time. It's like loads of crazy, crazy things were happening. I can't even begin to tell you. Like the amount of just bizarre things. Like me and Dan were just there like, what is this place? Like what? It's like, what's going on? Like crazy stuff happened. And the guys that worked in the studio, there's like a really nice bunch of people that work at Shangri-La as well. Like really cool bunch of people that work as technicians and just assistants and stuff like that. And they were all like, this is mad. Rick doesn't do this like often. Like just bring Jay up and like, I just thought it just happened all the time. But they were saying that it's a sign that he's excited about the project, which is really cool.
I read some quotes from Rick saying that JayZ, it really got into JayZ's head what he heard and it affected what he wrote for the next album that he made. So it had
I don't know if that's true or not, but okay. I remember him listening and he was really moved. And then he was like, can I play you some of my demos? I was like, he just got out his phone, play some demos. And the whole time it's like you're trying to like remember. I mean, it's just a conversation between two creative people about creativity. Like you've got to balance it somehow. There's a part of you that's like, oh my God. But then you have to just be like, come on, like why are you being like this? This is just the person who like loves language like I do, and how exciting to be able to have a conversation with him about his lyricism or about mine or about music. Like obviously he's got so much he's learned in his life. All I could think about was like, I'm one step away from Beyonce. That's all I could think about, to be honest. I was just like, man, I suppose she's more like a goddess, isn't she, than him? She's like completely unbelievable. Just such power. And that's I didn't meet her.
Yeah. And you're like, JayZ, this is great. I'm really enjoying speaking to you, but don't suppose Beyonce's out in the car, is she? Because I'd really like to meet her.
I didn't mean it like that. It's just like a funny thing, isn't it? It's like a different world, different universe. It was magnificent that Rick felt good enough about our music to play it to someone so important as JayZ, and it was really cool that he came and listened to the demos. I mean, I don't know what. I just don't know. If I ever saw him again, I don't know if he'd remember me or. Like, it's not like we're mates.
Yeah. Did you and Dan feel self-conscious in that situation?
Yeah, Dan, when Jay left the room, Dan was like, that guy looked like JayZ. Basically, just to put it in context, right, so we were really jet lagged. I'd got out of bed, I don't know, about 4 or 5 in the morning, like we weren't really sleeping, and we were staying in these rooms opposite the bus, the Bob Dylan's old tour bus, where we were writing. And like I'd just got up, I hadn't really like had a shower or anything, because it was like, oh my God, I think I understand what it is that Rick's been trying to tell us. I had this like epiphany that he just wants poetry, he just wants me to do poetry flow. There can be a beat. I'd had this epiphany. So me and Dan, we were like, I'd got straight out of bed and gone into the studio. I had on like a dirty shirt, you know, like I don't think I was wearing any shoes or socks, you know. It's like, I mean, it sounds kind of gross to say it, but like I was not prepared to meet like, you know, anybody. I was going into the studio with Dan to try and work out this bonkers thing that we were trying to do in this like bizarre place. So when he came in, all I could think was like, did I brush my teeth properly? Like, have I? I can't.
Did I just speak to JayZ with bad breath?
You know what I mean? Like, I hadn't had a shower. Like, anyway, that's a kind of embarrassing thing to admit. Like, I brush my teeth every morning. Everyone needs to know that. But like, just in that situation, when suddenly you're like, hold on a minute, am I decent? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
isn't there lots of different kind of remnants of recordings and people that have visited the studio, like Eminem's got a grapefruit tree, and like various, I know that Slipknot and Black Sabbath have both recorded there and left different items of like equipment and stuff. Did it feel like a place full of history? Did it have like an aura?
Oh, it definitely has an aura, like 100% it's got an aura. I mean, Rick's got an aura, you know, it's like, it's just an amazing place. So much attention is paid to creativity there that it just feels like a church or something. You know, it's like, yeah, there is this kind of hush about the place, which is in contrast to all the noise that gets made in there, because everyone's just like so reverent about it, because it's all about the music, and it's like really amazing music. And also loads of kind of crazy pop stuff happens in there as well. It's just bizarre. I don't know. Like, I've never really had any contact with that world before. So, you know, like before I ever went to Dan Carey's studio, I'd never seen a studio like that. I'd just seen like when we said I'm going to the studio, it just meant going to your friend's bedroom with like where I had like a duvet tacked up over the wall. Everything was always broken, and it was still like the best thing in the world.
Yeah, probably like, something like this that we're recording this on.
Mate, that Zoom is like, that's a step up. We never like
brought a high-tech studio with me today, Kate.
We like. Shout out to Quake Bass, who I spent my formative years like working with. It still felt like going to an amazing place, just going to my friend's bedroom and trying to make a track like with no equipment. And then when eventually I got to Dan Carey's studio, the first time I looked around there, walked in, I couldn't believe it. Like, I could not believe, you know, because it's like for a musician, for someone with an aspiration to be a musician. I wasn't a musician. I wanted to be all my life. I wanted to be a musician, but I was not able to do it. I couldn't get a record deal. I couldn't find a producer. I didn't have any money. Like, it was like I couldn't have. It was like I was a poet because out of necessity, I needed an outlet for my creativity. But what I wanted to do was like, you know, be a recording artist. So then when I saw Dan's studio and saw that desk, he's got, you know, this crazy desk, and he had his first instrument is guitar, so he's got like guitars from all over the world, and they're all hanging up around the studio, and it's all one room, and he records the drums and the guitars all together in the room, but he's got all these clever ways of like using mics for different. It blew my mind. It was like, wow, I want to be here. I want to be here. To be honest, like the amount of writing that we've done in that studio, in Dan's studio. We wrote all of everybody down there. We wrote at the Meet Chaos there, and we wrote the majority of Traps and Lessons there at Dan's. And then then going to Rick's place, it was just like, oh no.
Bit of a step change.
It's crazy.
With this new album, you are obviously going to go out and play it at various festivals. I saw you a few weeks ago at Primavera Sound in Barcelona. And then in the autumn, you're going to be doing a UK tour. What are the moments like before you go on stage? How do you sort of prepare yourself psychologically to go out and perform? Do you take a bit of a quiet moment away from Dan or whoever you're performing with that night? Or do you put some music on? Do you distract yourself? What are you doing in those moments before you go out and perform?
2 or 3 hours before stage time, your body starts to feel it. Like, even if your mind is fine, your body starts to preempt the adrenaline that's about to be unleashed. I have felt like really exhausted. You get really exhausted and you're like, whoa, suddenly you get really tired. You get nerves. I get crazy nerves. For the Catford show, I was nervous from about 4 o'clock the afternoon before. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sit still. Like, I get crazy nerves. Sometimes I don't get them as bad as other times, but I always get them. So then what becomes important to manage those nerves, and also for the shows when you're not necessarily feeling particularly present because you've been on tour and things are tiring, you don't get a lot of sleep on tour, you've got to be on it all the time, and it can grind you down a little bit. So it's also important to have those rituals for those days when you're not feeling particularly ready or aware of what's about to happen. The couple of hours before showtime, I've got my habits that I've formed with Claire Uchima, who I'm playing with at the minute. She's fantastic, and she's been playing with me since Everybody Down. And she's like an extremely grounding presence. We have some things that we do, like some meditations that we do. Like little things help, like, yeah, I do listen to music. I listen to music, but an hour before stage time, I can't listen to any music. 2 hours, 3 hours before I can. So I might listen to music for about an hour, do some stuff, might do some gentle exercise or whatever, like read, I'll read, I'll just chill out, try and stay cool. Try not to drink any alcohol before going up. Got to be careful about when you eat, crazy things like that. Like, it's better to be hungry on stage, always better to be hungry than full up. Never good to be full up on stage. And this must sound really boring to everyone else. But it's
No, I don't, no, not at all. No, I think these, the preparations that go into it, because it is such, it's intense to be in the audience. It must be to fix yourself into that mindset night after night. I'm not surprised to hear you say that you need to go through a bit of a process to get there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, man, it's crazy. You do, there's certain stones, certain things that we can do, like that Claire has introduced me to, that encourage certain intentions. Burn a candle. I just try and get ready. It hits me about an hour before. So I prepare for the hour before. Then the hour before comes and it hits me and it's like, whoa, okay. And you feel it and things get a bit it's like woozy. You get woozy. You get you're kind of drifting around. You get kind of lightheaded. You feel like you are, I don't know, moving somewhere. Something's happening. So yeah, I do things. I warm up my voice. I put my clothes on that I'm going to wear on stage. That's something helpful because I never used to give a shit about what I wore on stage. And then I met this amazing guy called Harris Elliott, and he helped me understand that even to not make a decision about what you wear is a decision about what you wear. People at some level, people are they're reading it, even if you wish they wouldn't, they still are. Yeah. So that's been really cool. He's helped me work out how important it is actually to just have a shirt that you put on and then you put it on and it's right, one step closer. Then eventually when you get to the actual back of stage, then I have to do some stuff, I have to touch this. I have my little rituals that I have to do, and then you walk out and that's it. Energy work.
Okay, yeah.
Getting ready for what's about to happen. Getting yourself in the right place.
Not to wish ourselves too far beyond the album that you just released. Just the other day it was announced that you are going to be making your debut at the National Theatre in 2020. 2020 sounds like a year that's made up because it's just somebody of my age. I'm just 2020. I think we're all going to be in flying cars by that point, but we're not.
No, we're just going to be dead.
Possibly, yeah. Somebody will have. Donald Trump will have nuked Iran. And,
Sorry. I don't mean it. I was joking. Sorry.
In 2020, you're going to be making your debut at the National Theatre with a play called Paradise. Is that right? What can you tell me about that? Have you started work on that? How far ahead do the preparations of something like that begin?
I've been working on that play for about 3 years. Amazing how it works out, isn't it? People don't realise. Once a piece of work comes out, you've already been travelling through life with it in your mind and body for ages, years before it comes out usually. this fantastic theatre director called Ian Rickson, who famously directed a great play called Jerusalem, which I went to see not knowing who he was or not having met him, with my friend Evie Manning, who's a fantastic theatre maker. Big up Commonwealth. That's her theatre company. Anyway, we went to see this play like years and years and years ago, and it absolutely blew my mind, changed my life. It was one of these rare moments where you're like, whoa, what is this? This was, I think, before I was even writing theatre, before I even wrote plays. I went to see that with her. Anyway, so this guy, I was lucky enough to meet him. He came to see Brand New Ancients, and we started to talk, and there was immediately, like, obviously deep respect. And we've kept in touch, and he's, like, always been very generous with his advice about my stage show and my stagecraft. And then he just approached me with this project. It wasn't attached to any theatre, it was just a project. He was like, look, I'm interested in this old play, Philoctetes. It was the final play that Sophocles wrote. He'd just been like 10 years in the Peloponnesian War as a general. And he'd come home and he'd built a shrine in his garden to peace, I think. And he'd written this play about, essentially it's about PTSD, really, and victimhood and having a victim complex and fatherhood and sonship. And it's very male, really, because obviously all those plays were, because they were played by men. But traditionally, the themes that it investigates are themes often given to male characters. Anyway, we started this process with like a room full of wounded ex-military men and women, because this play is about a wounded soldier, ex-soldier, who's abandoned on an island with a wound. That was the first time I'd ever really read this play. I was in this room full of these people reading it, who'd served either in Northern Ireland or Iraq or Afghanistan. A really interesting bunch of people that had like so much valuable stuff to feed back about this play and how they read it and what it meant, certain aspects of it, what it meant to them. And this is a play that's like over 2,000 years old. That was really mind-blowing for me to think about the nature of what remains, you know. It took ages for me to like process any of my thoughts about it, because I was, at the same time I was touring and I do other things. But Ian linked me up with this fantastic woman called Helen, who wrote me a literal translation of the play. So like literal, like in the Greek, it wouldn't say island, it would say sea-surrounded land, because that's how they said it. And she knows everything about ancient Greece, and she can like speak ancient Greek, and she's crazy, she's an amazing woman, yeah. So she gave me this real literal translation, and I've just been slowly working on drafts and drafts and drafts, trying to set the play free from Sophocles, trying to set myself free from the burden of trying to do a cover version of a song that is so fantastic, you know. Sophocles is obviously the great, great tragedian, and this version that will open at the National Theatre, which is unbelievable, by the way, in the big room there as well, the Olivier, it's unbelievable. That's like a crazy ambition that I had, that I didn't believe. I didn't even tell anyone that I had that ambition. Now it's going to happen. And so basically the play is very different in many ways to the original, but it's true to its essence. One of the main changes is that I've introduced a chorus of women, and that the players playing the male parts will be women, because it makes the construction of these gender roles even more apparent when it's women playing men, you know. Because these characters really are playing men, like the soldier, the general.
You've got Leslie Sharp's performing in it, right? Mm-hmm. Magnificent actor who I was first introduced to via The Full Monty.
Wow,
probably.
yeah.
She was in that. More recently, she was in Three Girls, the BBC TV drama.
Yeah.
Don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did see that.
Incredibly powerful bit of TV making, I thought.
Yeah.
Have you started rehearsals? Have people slotted into the players yet? Or does that start later down the line? We
haven't started rehearsals, but what we have been doing is throughout this process is that every now and then when I have a draft that's ready, because of the calibre of director Ian is, because of the power that he has, like he has been able to get us in a room with a bunch of actors so that I can hear what these lines actually sound like. Because it's all very well writing a conversation between 9 people, but until you hear that, you've got no idea if anyone else can follow it or if it's working or all that kind of stuff. So we've had like a few workshop days, and the actors have just been incredible. It's just been like, for me, it's like a revelation, obviously, to suddenly have, you know, the orchestra there, and they're just, it's amazing. They're just playing, they're singing this stuff, this text, and I'm like, I can follow it. It's like, okay, that needs to change. Leslie came in, she read the part of Philoctetes, and my partner, who's like obviously seen this play since its very beginnings when I started to write it, Made her cry. Leslie's performance, just in a rehearsal room, you know, that's how powerful an actor she is. Also, my partner's pretty sensitive, so but, yeah.
I can't wait to see it. I'm really excited. We obviously heard you talk a little bit about the work that you've done musically, see the poetry books that you've written, the novel that you've written, the plays that you've written and now adapted, and things like that. Of all of the disciplines that you're involved with, when you look back on any of those things that you've done, has one been particularly challenging that you found that's really kind of wrung you out as a process that you found was just the most difficult thing that you've done?
I definitely would say that the novel that I wrote was it was extremely invigorating, but it was extremely challenging. I think also because of the time constraints that I was under, I had to fit in the writing. It would be right, I've got 2 days, I come off tour here, I'm going back on the road there, I've got 2 days, and I've got to turn around another 40,000 words. So it was so being up against that was okay, obviously my life, my actual life just disappeared, and I threw myself at it. And it was incredible. I was learning so much about a form that I have loved my whole life, you know. I mean, it's taught me so much more about the novel, trying to write one, getting to the end of writing one. I thought I knew a lot about novels because I read so many. But actually, it's
turns out writing one's different
thing,
kind of fish.
Different thing. I mean, having an idea even that merits the form, it was that was the most invigorating thing. I was oh my God, this idea is big enough. And drawing all these maps, and the first draft that I wrote that I sent around to the publishers, it didn't even have any punctuation in it really, because I didn't properly, I'm not very good at grammar. I'm not, I never have been. My dad's really dyslexic, so's my sister a bit. Might be, I don't know. I feel really comfortable with words, so I don't think it's that, but maybe I'm just a bit dumb with grammar, I don't know, I just can't, I don't get it. So it's the first draft of the novel, the publisher, she didn't know who I was. She didn't know that I was a poet or anything. This was ages ago when she signed the novel up. She just thought I was a writer. And she was I love it, but I've really, this is what a speech mark is, and this is what an en dash is for. And I just thought I was writing this cool experimental novel because most of the novels I'd read had been experimental in how they laid out speech or whatever. But I realised that you have to know the rules to break them.
Yeah. Final couple of things, because I don't think we've got too much more time.
Yeah, I've been talking loads, haven't I?
No, it's nice. That's the point of the podcast. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you for giving me space to talk about my work like this.
Our pleasure. Thank you for sharing all of your experiences. That made it sound like a counselling session, which it isn't.
It kind of is. Sitting on a couch.
Yeah, it is a bit. Yeah, for people listening, we are just sat on a. There's no windows in this room. It's just a couch in the corner, but it's fine. It's nice and quiet. By the time this goes out, Glastonbury Festival will already have happened. You're performing there this year.
Yep.
But exciting is that Stormzy is one of the headliners.
Yeah.
Which feels like a really exciting moment for British rap, for the culture that surrounds Stormzy and everything that he's achieved the last few years. I can't wait, basically. I think it's going to be really great. You're a big fan of hip-hop generally and rap music, very much kind of your beginnings kind of came in that area. So is that a significant kind of symbolic moment, do you think? And are you excited? It sounds like you're probably looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. I think he's a fantastic artist. I think he absolutely deserves to be on that main stage, headlining that festival. I can't wait to see what he pulls out of the bag. I imagine it will be a really groundbreaking performance for sure. I think British music, British lyricism is in a really good place.
Who else do you really, really like?
So many people.
One of my favourite albums of the year so far is Little Sims. I think
it's a great album.
Her most recent record is fantastic.
It's a great album. She's fantastic. I love her commitment, as I perceive it, to her integrity. I really perceive that she's somebody who's extremely committed to integrity. I really respect that. And I think her lyricism is she's powerfully talented, she's got powerful talent there. I love her flow. I like the way she sticks with the flow, she sticks with the flow the whole way, all the way through. She stays on it.
Are there any achievements that you've still got your eye on down the line? I mean, you've been involved, you mentioned the National Theatre and what a thrill that's going to be able to have Paradise on there next year. Is there anything else that is floating around in your mind that you just sort of think, I would love to do that?
Basically, the thing about the National is that years ago when I was touring Brand New Ancients, I think it's okay for me to say this because it's true, and so I'll say it, but years ago when I was touring Brand New Ancients, they said, would you like to come and do Brand New Ancients in our temporary structure that we're building outside the theatre called The Shed. Okay. And I was like, okay, you're up for taking a risk by programming, new work by a poet, it's just different kind of stuff than what normally goes on, but you're not prepared to take the risk fully and program it in your main space. You want to put it in the shed outside. And I was like, I'm not really up for that. Like, you can put me in the main house. Like, I definitely want to tell this story in the main house, like, for sure. Especially that particular story, do you know what I mean? and what it was about and who it's about. And then, so I was like, thank you, but no, I'm not up for being in the shed, actually. I'm not really up for that. Like, then, 5 years later, 7 years later even, it was 2012 it would have been. 7 years later, it took 7 years of me just continuing to work. And now, now you can be in the main house. Yeah, okay, now this play that I've written, which is, I feel like the characters in it, similarly, I want their stories to be heard in a huge space. I want these stories heard in a big space. These are big stories. So, I mean, the fact that I said, it was an ambition, it was only an ambition because they'd said, come and be outside. So that's why I had this urge to see if I could convince them that this kind of storytelling belongs in these big spaces that were built for language to be spoken and, for rhythm and it's like, this is what these theatres are built for, designed. It's based on Epidavros, the Olivier theatre, which is one of the old Greek theatres. Anyway, so you asked me about ambitions, but I don't really have specific ambitions. I've just got like these kind of reflection ambitions to things that have happened or come into my path. What I will say is that I absolutely hope that I'll continue to be creative. That's my main ambition. That's the thing that I think about. And I pray, I really pray for, I just want to continue to make work. I hope that I have got lots more albums to make in me, and I hope that I continue to feel inspired. I definitely would love to write another novel. Basically, I would love to live a life which is always full of creativity. I don't necessarily believe that it will be my work forever. I'm very aware that that's not the case for most artists. Mm-hmm. But I hope I'll continue to be able to make work, for sure.
Thanks for coming on our podcast, Kate. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Wish you all the very best with this album, obviously, but also all of your work on the play that's hitting the National Theatre next year. So thanks very much.
Nice one. Thanks everyone for listening.
Anyway, good night.